If you've ever read any of my books, you will know that I'm a huge fan of writing a cliffhanger ending. But I don't do that anymore, and there's a good reason for that. In this video, I'm going to share with you what I've learned about cliffhanger endings from publishing my 5-book series, how they impact your series read-through, and how to most effectively approach the ending of your book if you want people to continue on and read book 2. Just for context, I have published 5 books in a paranormal thriller series that has lots of elements of horror and is a kind of gritty, fast-paced action-adventure series featuring 4 teenagers that have to fight these evil ghosts and do a lot of other creepy supernatural stuff. I wrote book 1 in college and have just finished book 5, and it's coming out in just a couple of weeks, which is super exciting. That's the genre that I'm approaching this from. So when you self-publish a book, and really, when you publish a book in any way, having good read-through is really important. Read-through is a term that people use to describe how many people, after reading book 1 of your series, go on to read books 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. There are ways that you can actually calculate your read-through. There are online calculators, there are templates that a bunch of self-published authors have created that allow you to plug in your sales and you can calculate your read-through. This is a really important statistic, and you can really measure an author's success based on their read-through, because if authors have really high read-through, it means that they're doing something right and they're delivering some sort of product to the reader that the reader really wants and wants to replicate as closely as possible. So then they'll go on to read book 2. So when I published the first book in my series, I thought that the key to having really good read-through was just to slap on a really shocking cliffhanger to the end of book 1, and then readers were gonna be clamoring to find out what happened in book 2. I was so confident and thought that I had the whole read-through thing down. I was like, if I just slap a super shocking cliffhanger onto the end of book 1, then readers are going to have no choice but to immediately run and pick up book 2 because they're going to want to know what happened to this character that they will have grown to know and get attached to over the course of book 1. But that's not exactly what happened. My read-through rate for my series sits comfortably at around 50%. Maybe a little more sometimes, maybe a little bit less. And this is not fantastic. Obviously, there are a lot of factors that go into a read-through rate. Jumping in from when I am editing this video, I also want to add that read-through rate has a lot to do with reader expectations and branding. So that's another thing that I have been learning and why I've been working on doing a full series rebrand. I'm redoing a lot of the covers and the blurbs and just making it a little bit more clear about what the series is up front, because a lot of the times people will like pick up a book and they don't really know what it is right away, and then they'll start to read it and they'll realize it's not for them, and then they'll put it down. And that number contributes to like the people who are reading your book 1 and not picking up book 2. And so if you focus on like making your branding really good and making it really clear what your series is right when you go and put it in front of other people, you're going to automatically filter out the people that know they're not going to like paranormal or know they're not going to like what you're writing. And those people are not going to try to read your book 1, which is going to make your read through rate better because you're not going to have as many people reading book 1 and not going on to book 2. Okay, back to the video. That number is not great, and I was not happy with it, but I also couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was really proud of the book. I was confident that it set out to do the things that it set out to do. There was a mystery, but the mystery was solved by the end of the book, so it wasn't like a really dissatisfying ending. I was getting feedback that people cared about the characters and that they were invested in the journey. And I know They Stay is a pretty niche type of book. It's not like a standard romance or a standard fantasy or a standard sci-fi. It kind of fills its own little pocket of the market with the people that really like the kind of paranormal horror type ghost stories. And so I know it doesn't appeal to everyone, and so that's also something that could be contributing to the read-through. Like people decide to try it and they realize that this kind of genre is not for them, and so they don't want to move on in the series. I couldn't shake this idea that the ending was a factor that was contributing to the read-through somehow. And I started to question my undying faith in the cliffhanger ending. So I started paying attention to my own reading habits, and every time I wanted to pick up a sequel in a series that I was reading, I'd make myself express in words why I wanted to read that sequel. And what I found is that a lot of books that had shocking cliffhanger endings, some of them still did make me want to read the sequel, but in most cases, they annoyed me enough to sometimes not want to pick up the next book just out of spite. But the reason that I wanted to pick up a sequel was never because of the cliffhanger ending. The reason most of the time that I wanted to pick up a sequel was either because the plot had a developing mystery that was spread over multiple books and that hadn't been resolved by the end of book one. This still made me angry because I'm a strong believer that every book should have a self-contained plot and not just have a mystery that spreads out over multiple books. Like if I'm gonna read a mystery book from beginning to end, by the end of book one, I wanna have the mystery solved, or at least a big part of the mystery solved, because that's why I read mysteries, to get that satisfaction of the mystery being solved. But in most cases, I pick up a sequel because I want to replicate the feeling that the first book gave me. If book one gives me a good feeling, if it gives me pleasure in some way, if it leaves me feeling satisfied, I have more trust that the author will be able to give me that feeling again. And because I want that feeling when I'm reading, I go and pick up the sequel. I find myself buying sequels of books that have happy endings far more frequently than I do books that end on cliffhangers, which really surprised me. I had really thought that the cliffhanger was a way to propel readers into the next one. So this is not to say that cliffhangers don't have their place, but I think they come secondary to an ending that rings with finality. Like if you're writing a romance, those characters live happily ever after. And that should be final, and there should be no like, oh, and one of them is about to go into grave danger. Or if you're writing a fantasy and there was a big battle, they win the battle, they're happy, they're living happily ever after. That ending should feel satisfying. And then the cliffhanger could be like, instead of, oh my gosh, they're about to go enter enemy territory and they might get killed, it can be a very subtle thread that might not have been looped at the end of book one that pushes into book two. Something that doesn't trigger the emotion of anger so much as it triggers the emotion of curiosity as to what's going to happen next. Now, I know this is not applicable for every genre. As I think back at the 5 books in my series, I actually don't know how I would structure them all without, like, with a happy ending at the end of every single book. Like, all the books tied together and they all faced the same antagonist. And I was sure to have a self-contained plot in every single book. If I had to do it again, I'd go back and think more about my readers' expectations for every book, what pleasure they wanted to get out of every single book, and focus my efforts more around making sure that I delivered that pleasure and that closure or that conclusion to the mystery or to the adventure, instead of using every ending just to push into the next one. Because I think that it's also really important in a series that is one big adventure after the other to give characters a little bit of reprieve in between each big bad. Because otherwise it can get really tiring to read if it's just non-stop action for 5 books. I'm really proud of the series and I really, really like the way that the endings are structured, and I think all of the cliffhangers work really well. But this is something that I've been thinking a lot about, and so I wanted to make a video on it just to bring it up and see if any of you have also been thinking about cliffhangers and how you as readers tend to react to cliffhangers. I'd be super interested to hear about that in the comments, because every reader is different and every reader likes different things when reading. And so this has just been my observation and analyzing my personal reactions to the books that I'm reading. So it's definitely something I'm keeping in mind as I'm moving into the next series I'm working on and starting to plot that out, just thinking of ways that I can have self-contained plots that fit both reader and genre expectation, and focus more on using subtle cliffhangers to stimulate curiosity and using meeting reader expectations and delivering pleasure to be the engine that drives readers from book 1 to book 2 to book 3. So that's it for this video. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. This was just sort of a bit of a brain dump because I wanted to share something I've been thinking a lot about. I would really, really appreciate hearing your thoughts in the comments, and I would love to have a discussion about it because it's just something I've been thinking a lot about. I hope you have a good week, everybody, and as always, happy writing.